Welcome to another episode of The Profile. My name is Gary Dunn and I'm your host. And tonight, in the chair, I have this man, Jim Rossiter. How are you tonight, Jim?
I don't think that's any of your business, Gary.
Are you going to shake my hand at least?
Yeah, seeing you've got a dreaded lurgy, I'd love to share that with you tonight, yeah. Tongues later.
So, straight into it, where were you born?
In a hospital in Williams.
And,
You know where Williams is?
Southwest,
Right.
southeast.
Right where the coppers pick up all the people going across the bridge from Narrogin.
I think I've been picked up there once or
everyone
twice.
has. Everyone has. Yeah. I don't remember much about it. I was very young.
So, you bought your first guitar in Northam for £8, I think. Someone told me.
A Belmont, yes, a nice red Belmont, or red on the back, and it was a bit like this, but it wasn't as good. Yeah, it was railway lines for strings.
Yep.
Really good. So then I worked at the Northam flour mill during Christmas, so I could afford to buy myself a better guitar.
Yep.
I bought an Excelsior, an Italian Excelsior, which I later gave to some guys at the Warwick Hotel in about 1977 or something.
Probably couldn't wait to get rid of it.
It was great. I think now, I wish I'd kept it for a slide guitar or something. It had a great neck. It took them about an hour and a half to break it in half.
Do you play slide as well, Jim?
Oh yeah, but I'm not no Dave Hole, you know.
No.
But not many people are. So, but yeah, I get away with it.
Yep. And so, your musical journey, how did it start? Where, how old were you? Who influenced you?
Well,
all those questions at once.
Okay. Well, my earliest memories of music from a childhood is my mother was a piano player, and she used to do in Katanning, used to do gigs with a sax player and a drummer. You know, like they'd play the RSL Hall or something. You know, and my sister and I'd be tucked up casino style in the back of the car, you know, like simpler times, you know. But I'd be listening to all this stuff happening, and, you know, it was great. It was fantastic. But she had a really eclectic, musical taste, and she could play anything from Winnie Atwell sort of barrel house type things, you know, stride piano. Yeah. She could play classical pieces, you know, anything. And my biggest regret really was that I wouldn't take up her offer to learn piano. She wanted to teach me, but I was fixated on guitar right from the first time I saw a guitar or heard a guitar. I wanted to play guitar, and I used to make guitars out of apple crate with a bit of lackey band and stuff, and you know, like a Jaws harp, you know.
How many keyboard players you know that used to pull 7 different girls a week, Jim? I mean, unlike yourself, playing guitar, you made the right choices.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you know, like music was all around. There was no TV in those days. Yep. I mean, I used to. The old man made a crystal set out of old parts he got from, I guess, from the army surplus. You know, like, and we used to listen to the Test cricket, you know, from England, and I got onto a guy on. There were only two radio stations in Katanning, and one was the local 6IX, which finished at about 10 o'clock at night or something. The other was the national broadcaster, you know, and there was a guy called Arch McCurdy who used to have a show called After Midnight. And I heard all these great guitar players, and like, you know, like there was Jim Hall and Wes Montgomery and Kenny Burrell and Joe Pass and Charlie Bird, you know, like all these guitar players, and then guys like Oscar Peterson and Art Tatum, and, you know, like Dizzy Gillespie, and there's all this fantastic stuff, you know, jazz and stuff happening, you know. So I got to got a fairly wide range of musical influence, you know. Yeah. And plus the old lady used to buy all these Reader's Digest World Record Club, I think it was called. Yeah. And so you get all these stage shows like South Pacific and Oklahoma, and, you know, Music Man, and all these, you know, stage musicals, which I guess seeped in because I'd just listen to anything, you know, like. So, you know, by the time I got to get a guitar,
You already knew how to play it through your mind.
Well, you know, I knew I could hear musical construction everywhere. You know, it was like building blocks that you just put one on top of the other. I didn't have Lego or anything like that, but I had sort of like a musical Lego happening up there, you know.
Yeah.
And then I heard the Beatles, and I sort of guess I taught myself how to play guitar listening to George Harrison, progressing, you know, like from things like Day Tripper, you know, all the riffy things, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember Henry Mancini's Peter Gunn, you know, that was like magic, you know. Like I heard this riff and I thought, oh, I love the way that's just moving, you know, like it's just doing something, you know. So things like Day Tripper, every album that came out of the Beatles, you know, like you know, up to things like While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and you know, like Something and things like that, you know. George Harrison was progressing all the time, you know, and plus I was listening to the musical construction of things like way back, you know, Michelle.
All right.
You know, the minor thing happening, you know. Dun, 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 dun. And that repeats. I mean, that's like Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah.
Basically, that, you know, like there's heaps of songs that you can hear parallels, and you go, oh, it might be a different rhythm, but the chord construction is very similar, you know.
So would that have led into you're a songwriter, obviously?
Yeah.
And so constructing all those songs at an early age would mean you were probably going to write them anyway one day.
Well, you know, yeah, I guess so. I mean, it just made. I think, you know, I didn't start off as a songwriter. I started off like all of us, you know, playing other people's songs.
Yes.
And for me, it was basically Kalgoorlie. When I went to Kalgoorlie, I was with the West Australian as a journalist. I went up there as their correspondent for the Kalgoorlie Miner.
Yep.
Attached to the Kalgoorlie Miner, but I was working on my own, you know. Like, and I jammed with some guys, and someone heard me, and next thing I know, I've got this Maori guy, Steve Ram, and this Maori guy, Vic Pitteroy, who was with Sitting Bull, leads eventually. But I had seen him around town, and he went by the stage name of Paul Jones, you know. But he was scary, you know, like he looked like a scary dude, you know. I'd never met a Maori before, you know. The nicest bloke.
Yeah.
Anyway, they offered me a gig with this band Acid Road, you know, which turned out to be, you know, a bit of a blessing, because I wanted to play music, but this band was doing the Tower Hotel and then going to Sylvester's nightclub, so they were working from 7:30 until 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, 5 nights a week, you know, and I loved playing music. I just wanted to play music all the time, you know. So basically, the first night I played with them, all these disasters happened. Nothing had happened for 6 months in Kalgoorlie. My first night with the band, all these disasters happened, and I had my mate who was working with the Daily News, who I was sharing a house with, was coming in and saying, oh, there's another plane going down at Learmont, and you know, like there's planes being diverted to Kalgoorlie from Adelaide, and you know, all this shit was happening, and I was on stage playing bloody some crap at the Tower.
Well, they're trying to get you to announce it, or
no, he wanted me to cover the story. Like the Perth is ringing me up saying, the chief of staff at the West Australian's ringing me up saying, or ringing him up saying, where is he?
He's got a new career,
and he's filing all these stories on my behalf, you know. So Stewie Richmond, if you're out there, mate, I love you. Anyway, I sort of figured after the first night with the band, I thought, geez, I'm having so much fun. You know, I'd rather do this. And
absolutely.
So I handed a notice in and took up music. But it wasn't until I was in a band called JR Band. Well, actually, Catch in 1976. I actually started writing some songs, like a couple of songs we ended up doing with the World Famous Oralettes, recording with the World Famous Oralettes. But I went into JR Band, which was Brian Davidson's idea. You know, he said, why don't you know, because I was in Catch with him, and he said, why don't you form an original band, you know? So I did, and that was when I thought, oh man, you know, there's nothing like actually writing a song and performing it with a band, and then seeing people singing the words, or getting up to dance to it, and you think, this is great. I mean, I had no illusions of being a fantastic player or singer or songwriter,
Yeah.
But the fact is, I could put together songs that people could relate to,
Yeah.
and not everything I write I like, but I'm sort of impelled to write.
Yeah.
And so, like you just, and compelled to write,
Is that because you're looking for that number one?
No, that's never crossed.
Sure.
I don't, money is, well, as you can tell, these are my best clothes. Money has never meant anything to me, apart from, maybe the ability to buy a better bottle of wine or something,
Yeah.
No, it's I always sit down and start playing something. There might be an idea. Ideas can start anywhere. They can, it can be just a phrase, or it can be you're playing a riff, and then you think, oh, that's interesting, And so an idea can start anywhere. It's what you do with the idea.
Yeah. So it's not lyrics first and then...
Not always, no.
Whatever comes out, comes out.
And so I don't know, when I start a song, I don't know whether this is going to take me 10 minutes to write and record, or whether it's going to take 10 years.
Yep.
And so I, I just, I write, and if people like them, great. If they don't, that's all right. You don't have to like them.
Yeah. You played with a lot of different people. I'm just reading some of these things here. Obviously Peter Walker.
Oh, do you know Peter Walker?
No, but I'm
Ray Walker's brother. Do you know Ray Walker?
Yeah, I know Ray Walker. Yeah.
Peter's his younger brother.
Okay.
And like Ray was, Peter, when I came up from Northam to do my last 2 years at school, I went to Trinity College, and I caught this bus from Rossmoyne, and we stopped at Wilson, and this little guy with curly hair and Coke bottle glasses would get on, and he'd be carrying a guitar, And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And he had the same school uniform as me. Anyway, we were in different classes, same year, but different classes, And anyway, we had a religious retreat one weekend, and we both took our guitars. So I cornered him and found out who he was, and, I thought, this guy can play. He was playing a Chet Atkins thing, And I thought, wow, that's good,
Ray could play, couldn't he?
Yeah, well, Ray's a great player,
Yeah.
Anyway, I got to know Peter, and I introduced him to the B string concept on your G. I said, why don't you put an E string on your B and a B string on your G string? That'll give you the ability to bend notes, And he loved that idea, So because in those days, I mean, you buy a set of strings, you just put them on your guitar,
That's
so
right.
you'd have a railway line on your G string, and you'd try and bend it, and you'd have blood pouring out of your fingers.
That's right.
So put him onto this idea. Anyway, we became really good mates, and he showed me. That's when I found out about Ray. I sort of had seen Ray. He worked in Voxadians, I think,
right.
as a guitar salesman.
Yep.
And he'd sit down and he'd be playing all this Antonio Carlos Jobim stuff and, all this Latin stuff, and he was fantastic, But apparently he started out as, I went around and to their place in Wilson, and there was all this sheet music there, and I said to Pete, do you play this? And he said, oh no, that's Ray's violin charts, And it was just like, ooh, shit, oh God. So I ended up, Pete was in a band. He ended up getting into a band while he was in fifth year, leaving, year 12, with Steve Tallis, called My Grandfather's Blues.
Yeah.
And they played at a place called the Gaslight Cavern, and I used to go there all the time and check them out. And they're a great band, they had authentic, like Steve Tallis was a bit of a bit of a musical historian, he knew all about Little Walter and Howling Wolf and all these guys before anyone knew, apart from the Czar Brothers, who had King Biscuit Company, I think, but they were doing sort of authentic blues as well. But and then My Grandfather's Blues morphed into Jelly Roll Bakers, and then eventually Peter used the baker part of that for the bakery.
That's right. Yeah.
And all through that time we were close mates, and I mean, we.
Paul Ewing was in bakery as well.
He was, yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very good man, Paul Ewing. He actually sang one of my songs on the first proper recording I did, a blues song I wrote in JR Band, which was my attempt to write a blues song that wasn't a 12-bar. and it was, like it was quite an epic song. It was quite a long song. But I approached Paul to sing it, and he sort of looked at me, and I'd heard him in Bakery, and I'd heard him in Natural Gas, and he was doing like Edgar Winter type stuff in Natural Gas, and I said, oh, if you could sing it like Jerry LaCroix, like from Edgar Winter Band, that'd be great, Anyway, Paul ends up doing the greatest version of it, like fantastic. Like really, one of my favourite songs. Still one of my favourite songs. Every time I hear it, every time I play it, I ring him up and I say, oh mate, like I just listened to that song again, and it just kills me every time.
Still listening to it.
Yeah, it kills me. Like great vocal.
Because you've written a lot of different things. Mr. Mocker 2 Goes to Gollywood is one of them.
Yeah.
There's some crazy headings you have for songs, sir. Can you tell us about the Cajun Girl?
Oh, Cajun Girl?
Yeah.
Well, that was...
Sue Bloke played on that.
Yeah, well, I'm very lucky. I've got... I play everything on my songs unless a friend comes around to visit, a friend with a special talent.
Because they're just one
And then I just grab them and I say, listen, have you got half an hour?
Nudist in the Freezer, is that Al Pithers in the Freezer, or Al piano? Oh, I play piano. Alzheimer's Lament. Very good. And can you still buy these?
Oh, you've never been able to buy them. They're exclusive. They're my Christmas gifts to friends, or sometimes they wonder whether they're actual friends when they receive them. They go, what's this pus, But. No, I've never released them. These are all.
This was my favourite, Mr. Mocker 2, Fuck You.
Fuck You, yeah.
Fuck You. It was fantastic. Yeah, well.
But I've got people on, like even from the first album I did, which was Wait and See.
Yeah.
There were people like Matt Taylor. Matt Taylor. I did in JR Band.
Yeah.
I did a support. Well,
a nice picture of Kalgoorlie.
Yeah,
71.
I took that. Matt Taylor, I first heard Black and Blue, and I remember when I was young and all that stuff in Kalgoorlie.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, who are these guys? Like Phil Manning was a great player anyway, But Matt Taylor and I sort of thought these guys Chain was really happening. I mean, they basically saved Gudinski, So,
yes.
So I thought, I had this idea that 9 years later or something, this guy's got to have tickets on himself. So Cosmic Christmas Party, I get ratted. And I see Matt Taylor standing there offending nobody, like being Matt Taylor, just standing there, having a quiet time. And I walk over to him and I go, I know you. And he's looking at me, he doesn't know who the fuck I am. I say, I know you. Aren't you? You're the guy in the Phil Manning band. And then I walked off, Anyway, Monday comes around, and Brian Davison rings up and says, "Oh, I've got you a booking for JR Band." And I said, "Really?" And I said, "Who? What is it?" And he said, "It's support for Matt Taylor and Phil Manning band." And I said, "You're joking?" And I said, as soon as he sees me, I told him the story, and I said, as soon as he sees me, we're going to be out of a gig, Anyway, I go along to the gig. It's at the Raffles Hotel, and I don't know whether he remembered me or not, but they couldn't have been nicer blokes. They were fantastic guys. Next thing, I'm playing in the Blues Boys cricket team with Pecco and Michael Glenn Dining Room Suite and
Dining Room Suite.
Dave Hole, all these guys, all these musos. Matt Taylor's put this indoor cricket team together, and then he pisses off on tour, and we're all playing, and like Matt plays about 2 or 3 games or something. We ended up doing pretty well. But anyway, so I got on famously with Phil Manning, and you know, we found we had favourite guitar players in common, and we were both playing Schecter guitars at that stage. And anyway, so when I came to do this Wait and See album, I had the World Famous Oralettes as the bass band, but there were songs that I wanted other people that I knew to come in on. And I asked Matt Taylor to, I think it's the only time he's ever done it, to sing a country rock song that I'd written. And yeah, no problems, mate. You know, like came in, blew the shit out of it with his harmonica and bloody sang the guts out of it, you know, like one take Matt, you know. Yeah. And still one of the proudest things, you know, of my life, to actually have a song that Matt Taylor sang on, because that guy's just, even now, he's still a legend, you know. I went to the Anzac Day, a couple of Anzac days ago at the Weir, just down at the Kent Street Weir. Yeah. They had an Anzac Day show, and Matt came on. I remember when I was young, immediately just people just gravitate, all ages, gravitating to the front of the stage, you know. And he can tell a story, you know, like he's a fantastic guy. But anyway, Sue Bluck sang on it, sang on the album, and of course Paul Ewing and a couple of guys I'd worked with in JR Band.
They all ended up at Gobbles at one time or another anyway.
Well, yeah.
And that's where you ended up, World Famous Oralettes, Trouble at Home, all those.
Brian Westlake Band, yeah.
So could you tell me a little story about Brian Westlake?
Well, yeah. Well, it was actually after World Famous Oralettes went out on the road, left Gobbles, and went out on the road to seek fame and fortune. Yeah. But unfortunately, it was a hard gig. You know, we had a big PA. We had Mark Whitehouse to look after. Yeah. That was very expensive. Pecco was managing the band at that stage.
That would have been really expensive then with Mark and
we were
Pecco.
Spending much too much money. We had big road crew lighting and all that sort of stuff. And although we were getting crowds, we weren't getting huge crowds, you know. Yeah. We got a lot of loyal people who came along. Like our last gig, I remember saying, you know, we came on stage for the last gig, and we actually did it to pay off our debts. And I looked out, and there's just a sea of faces. And the first thing, I walked up to the microphone and said, "Where the fuck have you people been?" Anyway,
could have saved us.
Yeah. So when that band broke up, Roy Daniel came up to me, who also played on the blues song that Paul sang on. Roy came up and said, "Do you want to form a band?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." You know, he said he'd been in touch with Bob Maher, and Bob wanted a band to go into Gobbles. So Al Cash, who was the drummer at that stage, and had been working, he'd just come back from the US, but he was in a lot of big bands in Perth in the 70s. And Steve Tallis, who I'd met from way back when Peter Walker and I were mates at school, and Leslie Hill playing keyboards, and Tony Borthwick, I think, playing sax. So we put this band together, and they said, "What are we going to call it?" And I said, "Well, why don't we call it the Brian Westlake Band?" And they went, "Oh." I said, "It's free advertising." I said, "Wherever you go, you know, like you go over to Rottnest, is it scribbled on the walls in the toilet there? Brian Westlake was here." I went over the Nullarbor. There was a toilet on the Nullarbor. Brian Westlake was here, you know. In hotels over in Melbourne, Brian Westlake was here. I said, "Great, you know, we don't even have to advertise." So I became Brian, and Roy became Roy Westlake, and Leslie became Leslie Westlake. The whole band was all Westlake, the Westlake family, you know. And years later, you know, I was in Port Hedland, and I heard this guy, "Hey, Brian!" Like, look around. And,
look around.
Yeah, I mean, there were people all the time who thought my name was actually Brian. So, you know, I mean, but that was fun. That was a fun band.
So when I sort of met you, you were the voiceover king of Perth, I reckon.
Well, no, not necessarily, but I had a good gig. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You did all the Bunnings advertising
for about 9 years.
And I remember the last thing you would say. What was the last thing you'd say? Would you like to do it for our audience?
Lowest prices are just the beginning.
Perfect.
There you go.
You're the man.
Still remember it.
So why did they sack you? mean, because that sounded so good, and Bunnings was growing so much.
Exactly. No, they let me go with a very nice note and a package. No, what happened is Bunnings was expanding to a worldwide, platform. So basically, they were taking over New Zealand, and they took over a whole heap of eastern states companies and rebranded them as Bunnings. At that stage, I'd been doing ads for Northern Territory, South Australia, WA, because that's where the only stores were. But they took over Australia and New Zealand, and now they're in England, I believe.
Yeah.
But what happened is the West Farmers, or the Bunnings management, went to the eastern states, and the brand agency who were running the account relocated to the eastern states as well. So the whole, like I was stuck here in the west, and what do they do? Do they offer me a house in the eastern states, or just change their system? So everything went over east, and I sat here fiddling my fingers, going, "What am I going to do now?"
And what did you do after that?
Twiddle my fingers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still twiddling?
Twiddling, yeah.
You must be pretty good at twiddling.
I'm a world famous twiddler there. That's when I got into serious home recording.
Yeah.
It gave me a lot of time to write. I did a few. I still, did jingles and did voiceovers for various things.
Are you still doing them today?
I did a couple of TV ads. No, I sort of gave it away after I had the change of life a couple of years ago, and I thought, well, I'm not interested in. I mean, if someone came up and said, "We want you to do a couple of ads or whatever," now, yeah, fine, I did a couple of on-camera things with. I did Dean Cox painting the Porsche thing, and I did a short-term ad, which was for the Warren area, but it was. I like Warren, and I was being filmed all around the southwest, and eventually I loved Warren,
Yeah.
I love Warren. Warren's just so beautiful, And this, so childish, but it was funny, it was good. Yeah. So I've done a few of those, but I did I wrote some jingles for Mrs. Max.
Mrs. Max Pies.
Yeah. And did jingles, quite a few different jingles, but I worked with Kenny Walter for 25 years, singing a lot of stuff that he wrote. He wrote heaps of stuff, and I'm on the Dockers and the West Coast Eagles themes, songs, along with people like Videlli, and there's a whole heap of us. There were about 16 of us in the studio singing.
Recording the
singing the Free-O Heave Ho, and then. Where they go. So there's been, a variety of different jobs.
Yeah.
And plus, I mentioned to you before, I think, I did every chicken ad that was.
Yes.
I was, Mr. Chicken Treat and Mr. Red Rooster for a long time. And I did a Colonel ad, and I did things for Red River Rooster that I didn't even know existed. Apparently they were in Queensland or somewhere, So there's been a lot of stuff,
So other jobs throughout your life? Have you done
well, I actually, no, basically, apart from a short stint at the Northern Flour Mill when I was 15, so I could get a guitar, I went from journalism to music, and then I went back to journalism. I ran the Sound Advertiser, which was a free paper out of Rockingham.
Yeah.
Went anywhere from 24 to 64 pages. So I was the photographer, the journalist. I used to do the sub-editing. Used to do the sub-editing, take it down to the Sunday Independent, and lay all the pages out and do all that. And then I did that for about 2 years. And then I went back to the Independent as a feature writer, and I also worked as a sub-editor on a paper called The National Miner, which was, finance and mining stuff.
Yeah.
And then I went back into music. Went back to Kalgoorlie eventually. I tried out with the Breakaway. Had an audition with them.
Tell me about that audition.
Oh, well, I hadn't played guitar for 3 years. I'd locked it away because I was, concentrating on my, trying to play a straight bat,
Yep.
I was trying to save a marriage which was doomed, and I was doing a job that I liked. I enjoyed doing it, but I liked playing music a lot more of it. So I had to lock my Gibson away. I locked it up and the Marshall stack, and they were sitting in a cupboard. I didn't open the cupboard for 3 years. And when I did, Steve Ram rang me up and said, the Breakaway are looking for a guitar player. Are you interested? And I thought, well, I knew the guys. And I said, I'll come down and have a bash, see how it goes. And it was terrible. I hadn't played for so long. It felt like I may as well have been playing a tennis racket, And they said, I'll sing a song, and I hadn't sung anything for 3 years, and I couldn't get a note out, and I didn't remember any words. And even to this day, if I haven't written the song, I make words up.
Find it hard.
I just make them up on the spot immediately. I can write down say a Mark Knopfler song or something, and immediately the words go out the window, and I make them up.
Yeah.
I start making up words, like straight off the top of my head, and I found that a lot easier than remembering words. So anyway, I ended up back in Kalgoorlie, and that's when I started playing music again and relearning how to play guitar and how to communicate with audiences, and that led to the Oralettes, which was my favourite band. That was a great band. I mean, people like Rick Whittle, Brendan Darby, who was a genius, is a genius. He's a fantastic musician, great artist, and a really strange brain. He's got this artist brain, like he's like a loony, but a controlled loony. Great guy. Lucky Oceans on Lucky, another genius. Another genius. And Alan Pithers, my favourite keyboard, one of my favourite keyboard players. He plays a lot on my home demos, and I mean, Pecco.
When you got him out the freezer, he could play.
Mate, he just plays some of the greatest solos you've ever heard. And it's funny because we've always had this thing. Years ago, like 30 years ago, when I met him, nearly 40 years ago, and he said to me, "How come you're always throwing in The Hills Are Alive?" Dun, dun, da, 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 da. He said, "You're always throwing that in." And I said, "Well, that's because my greatest influence in my life was Julie Andrews, and the sound of music, And to this day, and I used to go to gigs. If we weren't playing in the same band together, if he came into a room, no matter what the song was, if it was MacArthur's Park and I was playing with the Troupadors,
The Hills Are Alive.
Hills Are Alive would come in. Didn't matter whether you're in a minor key or, you still play The Hills Are Alive, just that signature, And through so many of these songs, and same with him, he'd be doing Piano Man, solo piano.
You'd walk into the Sheraton or something.
And we'd slow it up, or it'd go over. It could go over 4 bars, and there'd just be notes being played. But you pick it up, And as soon as you played it, eyes would meet across the room, So even to this day, when Al plays, and I say, just solo. I'll cut it up and just do a solo right through the whole thing. And then when he gets bored, he goes, and then I find it and bury it in the fade out at the end of songs. So a lot of these songs,
you got the fade out of The Hills Are Alive.
Yeah, all different styles of different
Give
versions.
me those. I'll listen to those when I'll get home.
But he's played some classic solos for me,
great.
And it's like when I listen back to some of these things, and I almost start crying because I think, how lucky am I to have people like Sue Bluck and Alan Pithers, and now Alan Lyford's on board. He great voice, great player.
Yes.
And then Robbie Pisano comes around sometimes, and I say, "Have you got your bass in the car?" And I'll say, I've just got a song that I want, you know, and he comes in and plays bass. I mean, I can play all these things, but I can't play them like real players can play them, you know. And there's touch, you know, like, I mean, years ago I got Paul Ewing to come in and he brought his little bloody electronic organ thing in, you know, like little B, what was it, Paul? B something?
XK3, copy of a B3.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And I, you know, like I said, oh, Paul, come in, you know. Immediately he plays this song called The Roadhouse Family, which I wrote.
Yeah.
Just a short story, but when Troupadors were on tour in, we were heading to Canberra to do a gig in Canberra, we stopped at this roadhouse, and there just happened to be the Australian junior netball team, the women's netball team.
Yeah.
They were huge, like I'm over 6 foot, and these chicks were towering over me. And then this little blue minivan comes in, and it's packed. You can't see into the back because there's these two huge women in the front, and the whole front of the cab is filled up with Coke cans and chip packets and all this sort of stuff, you know. And they get out and they got tracksuits on and they're huge like this, and the back door opens and these kids roll out. And they're all like Michelin babies, you know. So, and I'm looking at Hoss, the sax player, and I say, Hoss, get out of the way, they'll eat you. And so I wrote this song called The Roadhouse Family, which is
Roadhouse Family.
That became a catchphrase in the band.
Oh my God!
You know, like I actually gave some friends of mine, next door neighbours, when I was living in the last house I was in, who were farmers from Cunderton. And I gave him a copy of the album that had the Roadhouse Family on, and they loved it, you know. And his wife, the farmer's wife, still to this day, you know, this was 10 years ago or something, still to this day refers to the Roadhouse Family and says, "Oh, we think we met the Roadhouse Family on the way up from Cunderton today," like stuff like that.
So is that it in any of these?
Yeah.
Right.
And Paul played on that, and you know, like it's just when people come around, you know, sometimes they're just lured into this trap, and you know, like
the Venus
I just happen to have the computer on, you know.
I don't go there.
Oh my God! So, who would your favourite band of all time be, Jim?
Like the band.
Your favourite band of all time, you know,
I haven't
in the world that we know.
I haven't got one, mate. But
No?
I must say, I wrote a song called Ricardo's Out of Town, which was because Jeannie Norris rang me up and said, I've got 2 tickets to Steely Dan at the Vineyard, Sandalford.
That was about 5 years ago or so.
Probably a bit longer.
Yeah.
And I'd always loved Steely Dan. I'd loved their writing, and you know, they always had great players.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, she came and picked me up, and she said, Rick's on tour with Videlli, you know, so he can't make it. He's really pissed off, you know. Anyway, so I went to this concert, and it was just a knockout, you know, like the sound was fantastic. And so I came home, and I had this idea that I wanted to write a song in the style of Steely Dan, you know, using all those chords, you know, like the Steely Dan type chords, you know, the minor major 7 flat 5, you know,
all of those
you know, all that sort of stuff, you know. All of that, you know. So I wrote this song called Ricardo's Out of Town, you know, which was Rick. I was, you know, and a lot of people sort of said, oh, that Ricardo's Out of Town is a great song, you know, like, and I was pleased with that because it was nice to have that affirmation. So I really, they were great live, you know. But I mean, there's been so many great bands and great players and influences and, you know, great guitar players and, you know, I mean.
So in a word, it would be Steely Dan?
No, that's 2 words.
Oh, you know what I mean? Because there's
I've
5
got no
minutes.
idea. Who are you?
It's 5 minutes.
Who are you? I've got short attention span.
Okay, the best Perth band you saw live. Yeah, can you answer that one?
Wow. Oh, mate, I don't know. I don't know. There were.
I don't know.
They were a good band. They were a great band. I mean, you know, like I saw Natural Gas with John Lemon and Paul Ewing. You know, they were a fantastic band for the time. You know, I mean, Bakery were a really good band for the time. Man, you know, there's so many good bands. But
Well, I did ask you what your favourite was, but
yeah, I know. I'd be really hard pressed to pick one. You know,
no
like,
worries.
but those bands are great. I mean, you know, John Mayer was in a couple of great bands too. You know, I mean,
yeah,
you know, in fact, John Mayer was the first. I was playing this Italian guitar in Acid Road at Sylvester's nightclub, and Rudy and the Aardvarks came in and got up to jam. You know, and John had his Black Beauty with him,
yeah,
little Les Paul.
yeah.
And I was playing this horrible bloody fake Gibson, you know, like Italian thing. And he said, "Do you want to play my guitar for
Wow.
the last set?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." And I played this Black Beauty, and the next day, myself and the other guitar player in the band were driving to Perth to buy Gibsons.
Yeah.
And we went all over town looking for a Black Beauty. Couldn't find one as good as John's.
Yeah.
And I ended up buying a Gibson 345 stereo.
335.
345.
Oh, 345. Yeah.
BB
Yeah,
King had
it's
the
BB King,
355.
yeah, that's
I had
right,
the
yeah.
345, which
Yeah.
was the cheaper Gibson stereo,
Yeah.
but still a good, really good guitar.
Absolutely.
And I had that for a long time. But John was you know, like, I really didn't even know him, but you know, like he was.
Was such a nice guy.
Yeah, and I believe he ended up breaking the neck on that and had it as a wall ornament, you know, for ages. But he played in some great bands as well. You know, there were good bands popping up all over the
Yeah.
place. You know, like
Perth's always been like that, isn't it?
yeah.
Is it?
I mean, you
It's
know,
just-
great players, and you know, like usually you had to go east if you wanted to make it. You had to go east, and that was the trouble with the Oralettes as well. You know, we had offers, but it meant the
Yeah.
band was going to have to relocate, and half the band wanted to, and half the band didn't.
Yeah. Well, you made your money here and spent it all on tour over there, or you wasted it on tour
Yeah.
over there. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. Did it a few times. Your favourite TV show growing up? What would that be?
Well, see, we didn't have TV, like, you know, until we went to Northam. I mean, and even then you needed a 40-foot tower to bloody get reception, because basically it was Channel 7 and ABC, and they didn't have relay stations. So if you had a hill between you and the TV station, all you got was snow.
Just help me a bit here, Jim.
But I did like I Dream of Jeannie.
Yes, okay.
I did like the
That's the answer I was
Barbara
looking for.
Eden. Barbara Eden.
No, that was Bewitched. The
No,
noise,
that was Elizabeth Montgomery.
Yeah, that's
Bewitched,
right.
yeah. I liked her as well.
So you're telling me you didn't have a TV, you're coming out with all the, the names
No.
and everything.
Yeah, well, that's right. I made up for lost time.
Truth serum.
I made up for lost time. Yeah.
So, Jim, what does the future hold for you?
Nothing.
Nothing at all.
Death.
Death.
By degrees.
I don't know how to answer. I don't know how to answer that. Is that a question to? Or
Well, you know, I mean, what does it hold for all of us? I've got no illusions about, you know, basically, I'm just, you know, I'm in the waiting room,
yeah.
and hopefully I'll write a few more songs before I go, but if I don't, well, you know, I've written a few.
So, what unfulfilled ambitions do you still have? Any at all?
No, that's been my greatest pitfall and downfall, I guess, not having ambition.
Yeah.
Never had ambition. And that was probably, that drove my old man mad, I think. But I was just happy getting along with life, you know.
Yeah.
I really didn't see the need for ambition. You know, if things happened, you know, they happened, it was great. I mean, for instance, I'm small things. Just out of interest, I looked up the World Famous Oralettes on YouTube the other day, and I found this guy, Glenn Welsh, Glenn Welsh had put Dirty Weekend and Woman from the City on, like scratchy old copies, you know. But a few people had sort of said, "Oh, I used to love these guys, went and saw them," you know, and there were all these comments. And then someone started a conversation up, "Oh, I remember seeing this band and they did songs like Looney on the Loose, Bending Over Backwards,
They knew all that.
Rubber Love, I didn't even remember. I'd forgotten I wrote it, you know. But they came out with all these songs, you know. They mentioned all these songs, and some of them I'd completely forgotten about.
Yeah.
But Tranquilizer's Going Down, and I'm thinking, who remembers that? And like, you know, but they remembered all these songs, you know.
Wow.
And I thought that's fantastic. You know, 3 months ago, some girl says, you know, and the guy's saying, you'll have to remind me of it, how it goes.
Wow.
And I thought, you know, that's some sort of vindication.
Absolutely.
Just the fact that people, well, that was, you know, 1983 or something, you know.
Yep.
People still remember those songs.
Yes.
And I'm going, wow, you know, like.
You need to do a reunion.
I had no idea. No, I couldn't play.
Okay, so I was going to say,
magically appeared, didn't it?
yes, you need to do a reunion at the Charles like everyone else is doing. But Pub Legends of Perth, this is something that we've put together, or ProCopy's put together, and obviously the world famous
ProCopy.
The world famous Oralettes, Woman from the City, is on this.
There you go.
And
drug song, people, drug song.
They're $20 actually. They're to raise money for Pecco, your good friend Pecco, who's found times a little tough lately. So that's why we did the concert.
Oh,
And yeah, hold it up. Pub Legends of Perth, $20. Get them at ProCopy. That's where we're sitting right now. Good on you, Jim. Also, I want to get you, while I've got you, to sign this beautiful guitar we have here.
oh, sorry, mate. There's no room on it.
Yes, there is. You can just put a little Rossiter in there, Jim Rossiter in there if you like.
How come you haven't got the naked photo of the Oralettes on there?
When you open it up, that one. If you could sign that guitar, it'd be most generous of you.
This is a special pen.
Put it on the back next to Rick Whittle. You had a story about Rick you told me earlier on.
No, I don't remember seeing
I
that.
don't know whether you're going to repeat that story.
Oh, I don't know.
You don't know. I love it. Oh, God.
No, I love Rick. He's a great guy. But I went on...
You're drawing pictures as well.
I haven't done this for a long time, so...
Well, that's a good looking you. Someone's actually going to win this guitar, I think.
Okay.
Can you see that? The Jim Rossiter signature there, next to Rick Whittle's drum. You got Jim's beard.
No, I
Thanks,
just went
mate.
on... I was putting together some videos for Mr. Mockatoo on YouTube. And I was looking for Rick Whittle. Actually, it was One More Tear to Cry featuring Paul Ewing. And I was looking for... I got some photos of Paul, but I didn't have any of Rick apart from the naked Oralettes one, you know. And I went online. I thought maybe I can find some vision of him. Anyway, I just happened upon this drum thing, and Rick was talking about all the bands, people he'd played with, and he's reeling off name after name, really dropping them, you know. He didn't mention the Oralettes. So I thought,
That's
okay.
it.
And he says, I don't know whether I should say this, and he's saying it to the cameraman. And the guy's going, yeah, go on, you know. He says, Rolf Harris. And and anyway, so all these guys, the drummers, had said, Rick Whittle's a great drummer, he's a legend, you know, and all this sort of stuff. You know, he is a legend, you know. But I couldn't have this, you know, so I decided to put a comment under Mr. Mockatoo, you know. And I said, yes, well, apparently Rick and Rolf were closer than people think. You know, Rick was actually Rolf's third leg. And I said, Rick Whittle, legend? More like leg end.
Leg end.
And I haven't heard. This will probably get back to him now, so I will hear you. But
Yeah, you'll be in big trouble.
Well,
Mate, he doesn't say much these days, Rick. We played with him at the Pecco thing last week, and he was very silent.
well, you know, it's like that when you're under the thumb.
Lets his drums do the talking.
Yeah.
When you're under the thumb. You'll be in big trouble. So, so do you collect anything?
Grey hairs.
Grey hairs.
Not on top of my head, but the rest of my body, yeah. So if there's ever a market for grey hairs, you know where to come,
You
folks.
clean up. So last question, Jim.
Yes.
What would you put on your gravestone?
Coming soon.
Coming soon.
Actually, it's hard to beat Spike Milligan. You know, I told you I was sick. But I think for sale, near new, one owner, still in box.
Oh, Jim, you've been such a good sport tonight.
It's been a pleasure, mate.
Thank you for coming in, and we're going to have a clip, I think, next of you.
This is Bomb Scare, written by Brendan Darby. It was actually, we did this video clip. It was the first thing I recorded with the band. We did this as I joined the band, basically at the quarry in out near City Beach.
Yep.
And it's a pretty rough copy, but the soundtrack's okay.
So what year would that have been?
82, I think.
The quarry was going then.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, this was just a quarry. It wasn't. It was just a quarry. You know, like just limestone everywhere.
There's a quarry amphitheatre out there.
Yeah. We just went there and took over the place, and it was basically just they were mining it.
Yeah.
They had a day off. I think there was a rubbish dump around the place as well, you know. So we didn't feel too bad about it.
Seagulls.
But no, we filmed a bit of it around Perth. So you see a lot of. It's quite ironic actually, because one of the lines is about wealthy people, and then there's all these old dears with their scarves around their heads and their handbags walking out of the Perth station, the old Perth station, and they look anything but wealthy people.
Yes.
But Alan Lyford's walking around with this red headband on his head, you know, supposedly a terrorist, you know. But we had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
They got me in a suit for the occasion. So.
Yeah. Sounds like your life's been one big pile of fun, Jim.
Oh, no, I had a great time.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for sharing your memories with us,
My
mate.
pleasure, mate.
That's it for this week. Thank you very much for joining us.
Just another bomb.